1937 was the dawn of the Second World War. America, however, would not join until the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941. Boeing, at the time of 1936, had done many things. The Army Air Corps had just purchased 13 YB-17s, early versions of the B-17 bomber, and Boeing had also purchased 28 acres of land in Seattle and built a $250,000 facility on top of it. Boeing had also signed a contract with Pan American Airways to build 6 Model 314 Clippers. On December 2nd, 1937, Boeing delivered the XB-15 to the Army. It ended up setting a few records, one of which being a flight to 8,200 feet with a load of 31,000 pounds. In 1938, on the 31st of December, Boeing test pilot Eddie Allen took the Model 307 Stratoliner, the first American pressurized commercial transport, on its first flight. This prototype would later crash on March 18, 1939, killing its 10 occupants. The first Model 307s would be delivered to Pan American Airways in 1940 and would begin flying Latin American routes for them that same year. On June 6, 1941, Boeing would begin the production engineering for 264 service model B-29s, 15 months before the first experimental model was flown. By the end of 1941, the US had officially entered World War II, and Boeing would not create a new commercial aircraft until after the war. By this time, Boeing had produced a handful of combat aircraft for the Army Air Corps. The oldest and smallest of the combat aircraft was the P-26 Peashooter. This monoplane fighter was introduced to service in 1933, and the first of them to see combat were used by US allies against the Japanese in the Philippines in 1941. There were 12 Filipino-flown P-26s who claimed to have shot down 1 Mitsubishi G3M bomber and 2 or 3 Mitsubishi A6M20s before being burned by their crews on December 24, 1941. The P-26 was phased out of US service shortly after this. Another aircraft Boeing produced for the military was their famous B-17, nicknamed the Flying Fortress. This was because of its defensive armament, which consisted of 13 50 caliber machine guns. It entered service in 1938 and was used during the war mainly for daylight bombing raids on Nazi Germany. The B-17 was the third most produced bomber of all time, and gained a reputation for toughness due to stories and photographs of heavily damaged B-17s, such as this one, whose bombardier's position was totally destroyed, returning to base in relative safety. Specialized variations of the B-17 remained in use after the war up until 1959. The last combat aircraft Boeing produced for the Army was the B-29 Super Fortress. B-29s were used exclusively in strategic bombing missions over the Japanese mainland. They were well suited for, and of course, specially developed for, this role, and were capable of making runs with a range of up to 1,400 nautical miles with a maximum bomb load of 20,000 pounds. 2 modified B-29s, Enola Gay and Boxcar, were used to drop the atomic bombs Little Boy and Fat Man over the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. B-29s also served in the Korean War and were kept in service up until the mid-1950s. Once the war ended, Boeing went back to developing and producing civil and military aircraft, as they had done before the war.